Taking our working file 3 charts, we're going to explore the controls we have over the axes. Now, in our 3 charts, we have 3 different types of charts, which is quite useful. But really, the only ones with axes lines are the bar and the line. So they have an X and a Y axis. If we want to access potential values behind here and the properties that we can make changes to, there are a couple of ways. The first will be to select one of the axes. You can see there I've selected the vertical axis. We then go to Format, and it has vertical axis selected, and then Format Selection. That then opens the Format Axis dialog box. Now with that open, that's the properties for whatever is selected. We've seen this previously. If I now click on Plot Area, it says Format Plot Area. If I click on the bottom axes, it says Format Axes. Let's go back to the vertical axes. Now we have options in here that we don't really need to explore. Things for controlling the fill color. Currently it's automatic, but I could choose solid fill, gradient fill, and we've got all the options in there that we've seen previously. So I'm going to leave that as no fill. I don't want anything in the background to my axes. We can control the line. Currently it's automatic. We can make it solid, gradient, etc. So let's leave that as no. Then shadow options, glow options, soft edges, and 3D format, should you wish to add that to the text values within your axes. I may wish to add a little bit of shadow, for example, one of the presets, shadow there. You can see we get a shadow around each of the values. You may wish not to choose any. There is then the alignment, so effectively where the axis is going to sit. Vertical alignment is middle and center. We could choose top, we could choose bottom, and we can see with the values in our particular axes, it's having very little difference on where they sit. Text direction, we may wish to change that around. Stacked. That doesn't look quite right for our values. Rotate 270, so they're then turned round. Might or might not prove useful. Rotate 90, so they're facing the other way. Or back to horizontal. Or you can set a custom angle, so that they're slanted. That's all controllable by you, by selecting the axes and then formatting the axes. There are then further axis options. In here, we can choose the axis type. Automatically select based on data is a text axis, a date axis, where the axes cross, any tick marks, interval between tick marks 1, major, minor, really more appropriate on a line chart. Labels, interval between labels, it's currently automatic. We can again define that. Where do you want the label? Next to the axes, high, see how they move to the right, low, so on the left, or none, in which case we won't have any labels. I want to put those back next to the actual axes. And then we can control the number formatting. Now ours are labels at the moment, so that will change nothing, but we will look at the line one where we can make a major change. Now those are the basic options. There is an extra option here for text options that mainly deals with formatting the text, shadow and text box itself. But the axis options control the axes. Now, if we select an axis that has numbers in, as in our horizontal one, notice how the axis options here have completely changed. Now that we're not dealing with text values, we have an option to control the boundaries. So at the moment, the default is for Excel to control them, so they're automatic. So it effectively goes from the smallest value, which is 0, to a bit more than the largest value, which in our case is 14,000. But we can change this. We can say, actually, to change the scale, let's change the maximum to 20,000. And then that responds, and you can see now the scale goes 20,000. The values don't change. They still only go up here just below 12,000 in total for the caravans. But representative, that then shows there's a long way to go, perhaps to a set target you're trying to reach. The major and minor units. The major units are 2,000. We can make that a lot smaller. It's 1,000. And you can see our major grid lines then appear more often. This is effectively how you control how many grid lines you've got by telling it what the major and the minor units are. Usually by default, it's automatic, but we have control by coming into the access options. And we could change the minor ones to 500. But we're not displaying minor grid lines, so that will make no difference to our actual graph. Now, if at any stage you want to reset these back to the automatic values, you simply click the reset option. And they'll go back to what Excel feels is most appropriate for your chart. Now on a line chart, we come into here and click on our axis at the bottom. You can see the access options are again slightly different. because it's spotted that we're dealing with some dates, it has a way that we can deal with them. There's the minimum and the maximum. So that's the start and the end date. If you wanted to graph data across a longer time scale, you may wish to change the max. Let's change that to the same date but in a year later. And suddenly we've got a year later gap that has no data in. Or reset to go back to automatic. We have units. Now these are measured in times, so time derivations. Again, defaulting to 1 here. But we can change that to days or years. Or we can say 2 months or 3 months is a major or a minor line. So they are controlling when you get a grid line. Now we actually don't have the vertical grid lines on, but we could do. So we could turn on the vertical grid lines. So it's design, charts element, grid lines, primer, major, vertical. Now we're getting one of those, one every month, but if we change that to get a major line every 3 months, you would see that they then spread out a little more and you get one every 3 months. Or we can reset. Also, again, this is really only on the date one, in the number section at the bottom here, if we expand that, you can see that it knows it's dealing with dates and it's formatting each date by the actual date, month, day, year. If we only wanted to see labels for the months, then I could come into here, delete the D. So I'm now looking at just month and year and add that. And you can see along the bottom, then this then changes to month and year. January, February, March, all 2012, until we get to the end of December 2012, it then starts in January 2013, all the way through to June 2014. So you can control the number scale, which is very useful when you're dealing with mapping time, because you don't usually want to see all the individual dates. You want to see things at the month level or the year level. And I could change this, if I wanted, to yearly by going just to YYYYY, add. And you see then that we are showing 2012, 13, 14. I could then change my major grid lines to years, and we only get a grid line every year. So we're seeing the same data, mapped across the same time. We're just changing what the axis is displaying to either make the graph easier to read or easier to understand. So here I've changed the major grid line to a year, so I get the vertical line at each year, and you notice that the axis responds, but the axis number is what controls what we see in the axis. Otherwise, I would have seen 3 dates, one from each of the 3 years. That's controlling the axis. You simply select the axis, format selection to open this dialog box, should you happen to have closed it, like that, back in. And then once you have this box open, it will stay open until you close it. And then you can just move from one axis to the other to make any changes you see fit, like changing the minimum maximum value, changing where a grid line appears as a major or a minor grid line. And then with the clever numeric values and the date values down here, we can use the number option to then control the grouping really of your axis data.